Welcome to Watercolor Wednesday here at Church of the Palms in beautiful Sarasota, Florida. My name is Kathy Futrell, and we're going to be doing an underwater painting of the manatee today with a little landscape. So come join us. Here we go. I have an idea today which is based on this very simple photograph. Oh, it's not that simple, I guess, but it does it does have a composition of dividing the space as a high horizon. So we're not going to, we never want to divide our paper in half. What we want to do, and what we always want to do, is go either high or low with our composition. And we'll begin simply by looking at, this is the water and this is the landscape. It will have a little bit of sky behind it and a multitude of trees. So as I look at this, and there are several ways of capturing, these are Florida trees, and we do want to vary the sizes and the shapes. We don't want to go, you know, the same. Some should be thicker, some should be thinner, some should be taller, some should be a little closer together. We're using this photograph as a way of getting our feeling of our design. At the same time that I'm drawing the tree here, I should also be making the reflection in the water. So, for example, if there is a tree that leans just a little in this direction like this, then your shadow is going to be a direct mirror image of that leaning tree. So short ones and longer ones. And I have left a little gap here. Maybe I want another little tree. I've got this funny little line on my piece of paper. So guess what? I'll just turn it into a little tree. Okay. So I'm making, these are called, this is the reflection in the water. And the first thing we're going to be doing is sketching this much about our landscape, leaving this as your water, and we have manatees swimming. Now I see lots of little strange shapes in here. Somebody looked at this and said, are those rocks? I said, well, they appear as, and this is not a big manatee. I think that's just maybe the floor of the, this is shallow water. This is in a spring. Matter of fact, this is up at Three Sisters, I believe it's called, Springs. And that's near Crystal River, if I'm not mistaken. Jim, do you remember where we were for that? Was it Crystal Sister Springs or something like that? Oh, let's talk about the manatee shape. All right, so we were thinking, okay, what do these shapes really look like? We're seeing them in a profile. It's not going to be a very defined, manatee shape, but at the same time, we want our shapes even underwater to look like the manatee. And it appears that there are two, oh, you know what, the tail is on this end. Oh, one's going this way and one's going that way. So this would be this would be, sometimes it's hard to tell. This would be the tail.
Is there a manatee in the river?
This is a manatee in the silver, this is in an area, I thought it was called a spring, but it feeds a river. The springs would feed a river. Right?
I thought manatee were salt water.
Oh, well, they have, you know.
They're in brackish. They're in Crystal River.
It is a river, and that is correct. But you know, I'm no expert about the manatee. I do want to, what? Well, does anybody know? No.
Well, I've seen them
Right.
in Crystal River.
Yes.
And what I think of is almost like brackish,
Right. So
mostly more so the river. I've also seen them up at Rainbow Springs.
Rainbow Springs. So I do know when we went there, we walked on a boardwalk and we could get very close and see the manatee. And once we took a boat at Homosassa Springs, and we went out and swam with the manatee back in the day when it was okay to swim with the manatee. So I do know I'm going to do a grouping of 3. okay? And I'm using my reference to give me enough of an indication, and because it's underwater, and you will see that you don't have to have a whole lot of detail to suggest what's going on with the manatee, but they do have a extra little head that pops out from this body that also has a fin, and then the tail, and these are mammals, so they have these fin-like shapes, and I decided, I almost wish I'd made this one a little bigger because it's closer to me, and it would just look better if it were larger, I think. Okay, and because I'm going to be doing water throughout this area, and I think that I want to have this little baby one, a third one, very small, and I kind of see that here, and this is all I see. I don't really see a fin, I don't see an eyeball, but I do get that, and they'll be somewhat superimposed in the water. So let's begin our watercolor. This is not a difficult sketch. Maybe getting the manatee would be a little bit, challenging. It is a challenge for me. So I hope to make people say, oh, are those manatee under the water? And I'll say, oh, good for you. You can tell. I'll be happy. So I use different blues for my sky. This is a cobalt. Whoa. I don't need that much, but eventually I'm going to need a lot of blue here and for my water and for my sky, and mostly for my water. So I'm just going to begin with some nice blue across the top here, and I think I'm going to try to eliminate putting sky where my white trees are going to be. So I'm just going to bring the sky down between the trees a little bit, and mostly across the top here. And this will dry while I am looking at how to begin the water. So I'm going to do a bit of reflection now. Now, this has a turquoisey color. So coming up with a turquoise means that sometimes you take a look. This is my Skips green, okay? Sometimes if you have a bright green, you want a bright color. If you have a turquoise color, something like, and I think this is called Andrew's turquoise. I happen to have a corner piece here of that. This will give me that turquoise color. I want to go in watercolor from light to dark. This is my cerulean blue, and this mixed with a little bit of the green. You see, it gives me kind of a turquoise color. Now I'm going to begin with a little bit of turquoise, and I'm going to wiggle this brush, a flat brush, to give me a start. And here's how I make a smaller shape. I just make my brush a little smaller. Now this was pretty heavy here. Where I can't do in between some of these, they're just a little bit too, I just take the side of my brush. Okay, so I'm just beginning so that I help to define where are my reflections going to be in the water, and this will help me to start looking at the ground and the landscape that's up above. Plus, while I'm waiting for the sky to dry, I move throughout the painting to get, whatever needs to dry. And here's another thing that I'm starting to see as I'm doing this. Maybe I need to do a little dry brush. And the dry brush is going to help me keep the water feeling. Sometimes, I started out doing it one way, and then I suddenly realized, oh, this technique might work. Of course this technique will work. I don't want it to look like, which of course right now it does, that's what I did. And I don't want it to have, I want it to overlap so that it looks like the ripples. So then here, gosh, I am making some of these ripples just by using this dry brush. Now, I've decided I need to soften some of that, so I've just added some water, and I'm going to come around the manatee shapes a little bit. And so, yes, I have the trees showing up, and I want to, I'm going to have some darks in here, and the reason for that is because, of course, the trees themselves get very dark in here. So there's a lot of dark right here where I've just put the water, the color of the water. Let me just add some more so I can be consistent with what's going on all the way across here, because I'll do something a little different down at the bottom. You know, every time I paint, then I did this painting a week ago, and I layered a lot of the green on top of this blue that I started, and I kept going a little darker and darker. So I always start light, and I painted that different, I think, than what I'm painting right now. So you say, how do you do a certain thing? Well, sometimes in watercolor there's not a rule of, well, always do it this way. You interpret what you have in front of you. This is always the case with working from photographs or working from life, is you interpret what you see and how you can express it best through, that's why I like to have my puddles already here. And I'm trying to show the ripples in the water, and I am trying to get that dry brush look now that I had over there. Here, there it is. Okay. And I'm still retaining some of those whites that will be the reflection of the trees, and getting this color. All right, so let's say that I'm dry enough here to begin working with some darker greens. These are almost black. They are so dark. So I'm going to mix. This is my Viridian green, which is my favorite green. It's a pure green. And sometimes I'll take my purple, but if you don't have purple and you have this dark green, you could take burnt sienna or a little bit of red. Those are colors that will dull the green down. Now, because, you know, I don't know why I'm starting with that dark green, because I wanted to start with a light green. I guess I was just really focused on thinking about this one line, so maybe I'll just break my rule here for the moment and paint in between the trunks of these trees where they're going to really need to show up with this dark color. And you can already see that this helps to define what's going on along here, which is really a strong horizontal line in the design. Even though our focal point is supposedly what's going on in the water, I think that the strength of creating the contrast up here will give you the interest of the landscape, this Florida landscape. Now, I lost where my green-brown was, and there it is. And this is a nicer dark. Okay, and I don't always just make a block of color. I want it to have some variation. So coming through here, I continue to look at this ground, which is going to be light, by the way, and I might need to redefine it with some pebbles or some vegetation, and there might be some dark trees showing up in here. All right, so I was able to keep this as a shape of a tree. This is kind of nice, yes. I see my trees now. I see the trunks of the trees. I like to keep them straight, not bumpy. So I'm going back and sort of cleaning the edges of my trees. That looked nice. I like that. So I don't want to stop with these little stumpy things, so I'm going to dab some darks since I've got this on my brush, and I haven't run out of paint yet, so I'll figure this out and then move on to the lighter colors. And dab with that vegetation. This comes, some places are going to go dark all the way up, like this one spot right here, and I want that variation. If you're not careful, you'll cover up the whole trunk of the tree, and that's okay. You can put you can pretend like it's behind the vegetation. And I'm just going to darken here. All right, so I said I was going to switch to the light. And
Can you add, like, my turquoise, I can't get it as light as yours. If you start with a darker turquoise, what do you add to it?
just go with a little water to lighten it. That would do it. My tendency is never to use white, although you can get white in gouache, or you can get, but it tends to be too opaque for the water. I would just add a little water to it, and it should lighten it up and be the color you want. And it is best to start light. All right, so now I'm going to go to my yellow green, and I'm just going to lift. This is my bumblebee, or your Aurelia. Any yellow is fine to mix with this Viridian. And I don't want it to be too, actually that's a good color. I was going to say not too bright. I think I carried a little bit of the brown over. And so this is how I shape these trees. And I could use my round brush to do this, or my flat. But see how I'm sort of dabbing this vegetation, and I'm allowing the sky to show through. So this gives me the shape of the foliage on the tops of these trees, which is where most of the light would be happening, the lighter colors. There's more open space over here, but I'm going to come across and do cover up some of these trunks that I was able to keep the trunks here. And I've just gone back and done a little bit more with that dark. Now I'm going back to the light, and so that it looks like the light is behind, and some of these trees will have some on top. Okay, this gets a little skimpy over here with the foliage. I'm going to add a sense of balance by making this a little heavier over here on this one side. Okay. And so my foliage comes across, and I want to join right in here and get a little thicker with my greens. And I think I have to go back to a little bit more dark. And that's my green brown or green red or green purple, which does make it darker. And I'm going back on top of some of the darks that I just made and mingling that in. So I love to do this distant foliage, background, I would call it background trees, but I do sometimes keep doing this over and over till I get some depth and detail. Now I got some really nice dark right here, and I'm moving that through on top and around some of the greens that I have already. So I don't want there to be one green. I want 3 or 4 or 5 different greens here. But I do suggest that if you have a green on one side of the trunk, that you have it over here on the other side of the trunk, so that it looks like it's behind it. Okay, there's a lot going on here. And still want to not lose all my light colored trunks. And there's some sky showing through here. I'm going to go back to the light green. And be careful, what I'm doing here is contaminating my yellow by just putting my brush into the yellow. But if I do it often enough and clean my brush, I'll eventually get my yellow back to yellow instead of yellow-green. All right, I'm going to go on top of all of this with moving this dark in between a darker green to a lighter green. And I gotta be sure I repeat it on both sides. And, all right, so you can see now that I'm beginning to get the feeling of this landscape with some detail. I need to also take these same colors into the water as part of the reflections that are going on. And again, if you do your reflections as little horizontal strokes, think about, and I can switch to the round brush at any point. I don't know why I haven't yet, but I'm using the corner of my flat because I guess I'm just too lazy to switch. Okay, I just talked myself into switching. All right, so I take the green, a dark green, my Viridian with my red or my brown. I want to go really dark right up against this land. Matter of fact, I think I need some brown here. I think right up against the earth, I'm creating the shoreline with a round, and it's because I'm constantly looking at my photograph. I'm not just thinking, oh, this should be this way. No, I'm figuring out what to do by looking at the photograph. And honestly, there is a continual rough little dark brown line that defines the shore of this little landscape from the water, the shore from the water. And then within that, oh my goodness, now I'm seeing more. I am seeing that if I take a little blue and a little brown, and I'm making the dark, dark, dark color, and I stuck it over here on my warm side, and I'm just going to live with that. I'm going to make, because here's what I see. I see some dark branches and lines. These are trees. And then I see a wiggle line. Now that's a very harsh line. You see what I just did right there? But I'm going to take a paper towel and blot it just a little to soften that. That helped immensely with what's going on with this tree line. I'm going to now create a line, dark, up to the top of my page, and bring a shadow to this particular tree, and a line or two, and I'm going to do some more wiggle. Do you know that we could just, I'm sorry, but I could just stay right here in these little trees for another 45 minutes, but I'm not going to do that. Okay, that's usually an indication that I'm getting carried away. But what I see now are these ripples that are happening. If you have this really dark up here, then you're going to have some reflections that are really dark. Okay, so I'm lifting a little of that that's in the water, and I can calm it down. But do you see how you could keep going with defining what's up here to look as realistic as you can? I'm going to stop because I know that I want to develop these trees more, but I have to do these green reflections in the water. From what's here, it has to be here. So without losing all of my little whites, I am, again, looking at my photograph and interpreting where these greens are going, and just stroking to make, wow. So I can even see, look at this. It's like a constant little wiggle that goes all the way down. Do y'all see, if you look at the photograph, you see those little wiggles that just move right into where the manatee are, right down into this area. So obviously, this takes a lot of paying attention to, I'm going back to that turquoise color now. It takes a lot of attention to what the photograph is saying. Now at this point, all of my little all of my little trees that I've tried to keep the white showing, I'm not going to see them anymore. At this point, about the middle of my piece of paper, the water now becomes more interesting in terms of just wiggling the turquoise colors. And I will get a little stronger and move that turquoise color across. I could use a little cerulean blue, which is the sky color, more of the sky color. And I really like that green in there, though. The green mixed with the, so let's talk about the manatee, okay? And this is building the water. So we still have a lot of water down here. We have to get these manatee so that they appear to be underwater. So I'm going to switch back to my flat round, and I'm going to make a gray. And my gray is a little bit of blue with a little bit of brown. Actually, I have some right here. And that grayness has a feeling of blue. Can you see this gray? You could, if you have a Payne's gray, it's very similar to a Payne's gray. Blue-brown will give you this lovely color. Now, I am blotting the gray so that I can paint. I can always get more color, but there is a lightness to the top of the manatee and a darkness to the bottom of the manatee because it's underwater. At the same time, there's some ripples over the manatee. So I am leaving some little highlights on the body of the manatee that I sketched here. And it's got a bit of an ambiguous shape. I wanted to show that there's a fin here. And I'm doing the same thing with the little baby. You know, that baby is so light. I think its little body is coming up out of the water. I think that you can really see the lightness of that gray coming up out of the water. So I'll probably make this a little darker down here. I'm outlining and following the dark on that little baby manatee. Okay, so here's what I see with the shape of that baby manatee, okay? I've kept it light on top, and this one, I will call this the daddy here of a family, and this is going to be rather dark, and the fin seems also dark, and again a bit ambiguous on the nose and on the body. It looks like it's coming up out of the water here. So I'm going to make that rather light with just a wash. Okay, because I can always give a little more detail. Now I'm going to begin painting the turquoise where I see it around the manatee, and I'm using a little bit of that green, light green, with my blue as a turquoise color. And I see it as dark shadows underneath the manatee shapes. And I don't want to lose opportunities to show ripples in the water. And that means that I have to wiggle the brush as I move around. And these colors are really leaving some light highlights and then getting darker here. I think it's a little tricky to show if you paint around them, and then you've got to do a little bit on top of the manatee. So where I'm seeing it quite dark, I'm going ahead with that. This has a very distinct shape, however. So I'm trying to honor that shape. All right, now there's some movement in the water that appears to be happening around the manatee fish. They're not fish, mammals. Well, around the manatee, and I'm going to exaggerate that water movement. And that's kind of a circular activity going on around like this. So I am moving these lines to capture that, and then I'm integrating that into the landscape and reflection from the from above. All right. Now, I just got real carried away here with some nice darks. And I'm going to, I see a lot of dark happening right up here in this side of the painting. And I'm going back among the reflections that are these trees. They're still being hinted about. As long as my sketch was correct, I think it'll still work to look like a reflection going on. And there are some darks in here. So this is a bit of a challenge to create a landscape with water reflections and the underwater idea. I'm going to switch back to my round brush because I do think, and I haven't started down here, but I do want to have a sense of the water going on top of the manatee. I feel like going up against and then showing some of the water lines going here. And on this particular one, I'm going to let the lines go over the manatee, and so it creates a little more of a transparency for the manatee. And that's working pretty good right here. I'm going to go ahead and get a lot of wash down at the bottom here because obviously I need this blue color. I need a lot of this blue color. And I am going to let this flow and try to keep some of the whites happening. And I am getting to a point, even though I'm not quite finished, I think that I am going to come up with a stop and I'll describe what happens as you see my other little painting here, what to do to finish. Now this little guy right here, this manatee, is now a little more exposed, and I'll show you how I would create a little more on top. This one does need a little darkening, but I've just painted some strokes on top of that one and a few strokes here on top of this one.
So is your gray, is it dry?
It is somewhat dry. It bled a little in a couple of places because I was working quickly, but your best bet is to let it dry. And thanks for mentioning that, because when I'm working as quick as I am, it's dry enough. And this one is dry now that I can add the strokes over, and then you can. I still think I could get a little darker. See in the photograph how dark it is right here? And I can still put darks in here. I would prefer to let it dry a little bit more. But for instance, that belly could get a little, and you can suggest some of the wrinkles. You can suggest some of the nose a little better here, and a little bit more darks. All right, so I am still putting in, this has some shadows here and some darker shadows up here. We want to vary the values within this painting. Right now I'm still working kind of wet and wet, but I would like to do more washes after it dries. I know that when I worked over here on this particular one, I kept going back and forth with more of the color on top. And you see I also added this little bit of golden color and gave some shadows to my trees. So those would be the kind of finishing touches, I think. So does anybody have any final questions before we stop? Okay, so what you would do is just add your light, add a little bit of shadows over here on the trunks of the trees, continue building a little bit more of the water coming and joining these two sections, the upper section with the lower section. And you see I did add quite a few more lines right in here and some darker lines even with this little round brush to complete the idea that there is movement in the water. So these can be done as little ripples on top of this once it dries. And just what you need to do is have fun and try to mimic what's happening in your landscape and the underwater manatee. Thanks for joining us today.